Today we will learn a new object for creating gameplay, a relay. In simple terms, the function of a relay is to receive and send signals. In the previous videos, we could notice that the targets have a built-in relay functionality, but there is also a dedicated object with more features. Let's create a new stage based on the large hangar. We will move the default objects to free up space. To turn on the move mode, we use the M key, rotate objects with the arrow keys. The workshop shortcuts have been explained in the first two videos. If you haven't watched them, it's better to watch. Don't forget to save the level. Basic gameplay works correctly. Let's create a relay and place it between the checkpoint and the target. Let's set it up so that the checkpoint sends a signal to the relay, and the relay sends a signal to the target. Let's check. Everything works, the signal is transmitted. One of the functions of a relay is to transmit a signal with a delay. By default, the delay is 0. Let's set it to 1 second. Let's see what happened. Indeed, the target was activated with a delay of 1 second. The simplest application of the delay is the non-simultaneous activation of checkpoint targets. Let's make 5 targets and activate each one through a different relay with increasing delays. All relays will be activated by the checkpoint. First we clone the targets with the K key to save the adjusted parameters. Now we clone the relay. It would be possible to create a relay using the N key, but cloning is faster. We will give each relay increasing intervals in 0.2 of a second increments. Please note that for relays with a delay set greater than 0, an icon with a timer is added. Now let's combine all the relays into one group so that it is convenient to bind them to the checkpoint. Next, we need to assign a target to each relay. This could have been done before, but we have broken down the gameplay creation into steps for better understanding. Let's see the result. This interesting effect can be used to surprise the player if they are used to having all targets visible immediately after the checkpoint is activated. The second task that the relay can solve is signal accumulation. The relay can be configured in such a way that it sends a signal only after receiving a predetermined number of signals. This can be used when some game event requires the destruction of several targets. For example, If there are several rows of targets and you need the next row to rise only when all the targets of the previous row are destroyed. Let's create 3 rows of 3 targets each. Hint. To place the targets neatly at the same distance, we align them with the pattern of the floor. Looks good. Let's add a checkpoint. Each row will be assigned its own group, and the targets will be disabled by default. We assign Bravo, Charlie and Delta groups. Please note that when in the list of groups for each, the number of objects in the group is indicated in brackets. This is important so as not to make a mistake when creating a new group and not to take an already created one. The checkpoint will point to the targets of the first row. Between the rows we will put 2 relays. The first row targets will send signals to the first relay, and the relay will activate the second row targets. Similarly, the targets of the second row will send signals to the second relay and then the relay will activate the third row. Here we use a little trick that is useful when creating stages with multiple checkpoints. In order not to repass already configured checkpoints during testing, they can be disabled. We disable the first checkpoint and move the starting point to the second one. Let's see what happened. Indeed, rows of targets are activated, but we can raise the next row without destroying the previous one. To fix this, we'll set the accumulator value to 3. Now everything works as intended, the rows rise in turn one after another. Now let's take a closer look at the checkpoints. Checkpoint objects contain fully functional relays with all the features. Therefore, some tasks can be solved without using dedicated relays. We will also test the third type of assignment of relay signal receivers, a random object from a group. We will now create a group of 7 targets. Let's create a new checkpoint. We combine the targets into a group and make them off by default. Now we bind targets to a checkpoint and disable the previous checkpoint to speed up testing. Let's check the created gameplay. As expected, the checkpoint raises all targets. Now we will change the target type from a group to a random object from a group. Let's check what has changed. Only one target, chosen at random, is raised. Now let's make it so that 3 random targets rise. To do this, we use the relay feature to repeat the signal. Set the number of repetitions to 3. The parameter is located in the Advanced Settings section. Let's see what we got. Indeed, 3 randomly selected targets are raised, with an interval of 1 second. But we want the targets to rise at the same time. To do this, we return to the settings and change the interval between signal repetitions from 1 second to 0. Now here's what we wanted. In this way, you can create stages with non-deterministic gameplay, so that the player does not know in advance which targets will appear for the checkpoint, and with each new game, different targets are chosen. Now we will proceed to a more complex scenario of activating a random object from a group. We will create a checkpoint with a time limit and a group of respawning targets with a random activation of the next target. In the previous video, we already created resurrecting targets, but there they were not connected to each other and rose randomly. Now we will make the next target rise only when the previous one is destroyed. We create a new target and clone it so that we get a square of 9 targets. Like last time, we follow the pattern of the floor to set the targets at an equal distance. Done, the targets are in place. Now let's create a checkpoint. To control the activation of targets, we need a dedicated relay. We need to configure the checkpoint so that it activates the relay. Now we have to set up the targets. Attention, all settings will be made at once, and then repeated on all targets. First, we need to disable the target at the start. Second, the targets must be combined into one new group. Third, each target will send a signal to the relay. And fourth, and most importantly, we need to enable resurrection for the targets. In the last video, we set up resurrection after a time interval after the destruction of the target, and now the relay will be responsible for the resurrection, which means we must enable resurrection on a signal. Done, let's repeat the settings for all the targets. Now we need to go back to the relay and assign a target to it, a random object from our group of targets. The last thing to remember is to change the goal of the checkpoint from destroying all targets to destroying the maximum number of targets in a limited time. We forgot to disable the penultimate checkpoint, so when testing, we will have to start with. Let's see what we've done. When a checkpoint is activated, the signal from the checkpoint goes to the relay. The relay activates a random target from the group. When a target is hit, a signal from it is sent back to the relay and the relay selects the next random target from the group and activates it. And so it continues in a loop until the time on the checkpoint runs out. Let's disable the previous checkpoint so as not to waste time when testing. The game turned out to be interesting, but the gameplay lacks dynamics. In the last video, we already learned that you can speed up the game if the targets send a signal when they are destroyed, and not when they are completely lowered, as it is by default. Let's do it. Sorry, this time we forgot to move the starting point and we need to run to a new checkpoint. Let's see what has changed. The game has really become much faster and more dynamic. Now the next target rises immediately after hitting the previous one. Let's finally do what we forgot about, move the starting point to a new checkpoint. Now let's see how we can make the gameplay even more challenging. In the last video, we learned about such a target feature as automatic deactivation after a specified time interval. Let's see if we can use it here. For the experiment, we set a small time interval. Attention! In order for the signals to be sent correctly, it is important to enable the sending of signals when the target is destroyed or when the target is lowered. Now we will apply the new settings to all targets. We see that after the last changes, we have less time to aim and shoot. If we are late, the target is lowered and another target is raised. Let's try again. Difficulty can be increased by setting the waiting time to 0. Then the player will have time to hit the target only during the raising and lowering of the target. For the test, we set targets on a small square. That's why it's easy to aim and shoot. In real stages, you will probably want to place targets more distributed over the location, and then it will be more difficult to hit the target in time. We just learned how to create a looped activation of random targets. And now, using an example, let's see how we can scale the number of targets in a cycle. In this example, we will need many targets. Let's create a big square of 16 targets. While we're cloning the targets, let's talk about what we want to do. In the previous example, when one target was hit, the next one was raised. On checkpoints with a long time interval, this can be boring. And although we made the gameplay faster at the end, playing at such a pace for a long time is tiring. Therefore, it would be interesting to make the game slow at the beginning and fast at the end. This can be achieved, for example, if at the beginning there is only one active target, and as time passes, additional ones will rise. In all other respects, the targets should behave the same as in the previous example. When one is hit, another one rises. The task seems complicated. With the help of a relay it is solved simply. The fact is that the relay is capable of not only transmitting signals, but also generating them. We already used signal generation in the third part of this video to raise several random targets at the same time when a checkpoint is activated. Now we will learn how else we can use signal generators in relay. Done, the targets are in place. Now we create a new checkpoint. Let's not repeat the mistake and disable the previous checkpoint and move the starting point. Let's create a relay. Now we will set up the targets in the same way as the previous checkpoint. Disable at start. Assign a group. Assign a target relay. Allow resurrection on signal. Send a signal when destroyed or lowered. As always, we repeat the settings on all targets with the G key. We complete the relay setup, assign a new group of targets as the recipient of the signal. And the last thing, we bind the relay to the checkpoint. And to speed up testing, we will reduce the checkpoint time to 30 seconds. Let's test what happened. Oops, when we set up the targets, we missed one. We need to stop the game and fix the missed target. Now we can test the gameplay. Everything works as expected, the targets rise randomly one after the other as they hit. Now the magic begins. To start the activation of additional targets, we must send a new signal to the main relay. To send a signal, we need a relay. Let's create an additional relay, a signal generator, and make it send signals to the main relay every 5 seconds with an initial delay. Thus every 5 seconds a new target will rise. And in order for the additional relay to start working, we bind it to the checkpoint. We assign the main relay as the recipient of the signal. Set a delay of 5 seconds. Make an infinite repeat counter. And set the interval between repetitions. Let's check if this works. Now we will not shoot at targets. Just watch the timer at the top of the screen and the targets. 5 seconds passed and a new target rose. One more. And more. This target is hidden behind the near target on the left. Now we see the target. And the last one. In fact, the scheme can be slightly simplified. If we remove the delay in the additional relay, we can remove the binding of the main relay to the checkpoint. Thus, the checkpoint activates only the additional relay, and it sends signals to the main relay with an interval of 5 seconds. Let's test the gameplay. Everything works perfectly. We see that as the time runs out, new targets rise and the speed of the game increases. Let's play again. In real-life stages, you will most likely have less stressful gameplay, but we set it up this way only to demonstrate the capabilities of the relay. In this video, we explored the advanced features of the relay. With their help, you can create diverse and interesting gameplay. Thank you for watching.